Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's episode of Farm Connections, we travel to Onalaska, Wisconsin to visit the Rainbow Ridge Farm. Ken Thiesse brings us the Ag Business Forecast, and Steve Lawler of the Mower County Soil Water Conservation District discusses the results of a 3-year soil survey. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections, sponsored by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned cooperative in Claremont, Minnesota, produces ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil, and beverage-grade carbon dioxide for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood. Southern Minnesota Center for Agriculture, promoting education and careers in agriculture, connecting students with college, curriculum, and industry resources to develop, fill, and sustain jobs with agriculture in our region.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're on a farm near Onalaska, Wisconsin, a farm that's very unique, agritourism, and with me is Donna Murphy of Rainbow Farm.
Yes, Rainbow Ridge Farms.
You've got a lot happening here. Tell us about it.
We are originally started as a bed and breakfast and no intentions of ever farming. I had never been on a farm in my life, neither had Cindy. And somebody gave us a goat, and somebody gave us a goat, and somebody gave us a lamb. And then we went to county fair and we discovered that 4-H didn't have any goat leaders. And there were a lot of kids who wanted to show but didn't have goats. So I agreed to get a few goats so we could do this, and it was a Cindy idea. My partner Cindy is just very passionate about her goats and her, teaching the kids and about goats and that type of thing. So we got a few goats, and now we have 110 of them. And we have 13 breeds of goat, and we sponsor 4-H. We have 17 children who show our goats at county fair, at state fair. She takes them all over the place and shows. We do educational farm camp. We have a 10-week summer farm camp. And the kids, we have baby goats. The kids are, first thing in the morning, 7 o'clock, they're cuddling baby goats. Anytime you need to look for a kid, you look in a baby goat barn because they're either there or they're with the baby chickens. And we've just expanded to become so much more than a bed and breakfast. I had no idea we could do all of this. There are days when I wonder how we do all this.
You started with bed and breakfast and then morphed or transitioned into the farm?
We started with the bed and breakfast, and then we started farming, and then we started with 4-H, and then we started with summer camp, and now we're doing goat yoga twice a week. Back
up a second. Goat yoga. What's that like?
You would never expect people, because we get a lot of prim and proper type yoga people, right clothes, right mat, right this, and they sit there and this little goat crawls up their chin and it nibbles on them and it walks on them and they just die laughing and they giggle and they never do yoga again the whole session, but they have so much fun. And it to see somebody, I mean, we had a fraternity from UWL out here. And these guys are big. They're football players. They're huge. And this guy just melted into a little puddle because this little bitty 4-pound goat just kind of walked up him and snuggled up under his chin and just laid down. And it didn't even take up part of the shoulder because this guy's so big. And he was just this puddle, he couldn't believe this little baby goat was just cuddling him like that.
Sounds very therapeutic.
I think so. We get a lot of, we do a lot of farm tours with special needs kids. We get a lot of kids who have never touched an animal and have always dreamed of it. We had a lady here last weekend. She had always dreamed of petting a pig. She's 35 years old and never petted a pig. And she's from Minnesota, and y'all got pigs over there. So we arranged to get a little pet pig here. And for 2 hours, that's all she did. She says it made her entire life because she had always wanted to touch a pig. And I just her smile And the joy in just petting that animal was just so much fun.
So you're really doing society a big favor. The therapeutics are connecting people to nature, agriculture, and you probably have a teacher background.
Yes, I have a master's degree in education, and I've been teaching on and off for 30 years. I last taught in a Waldorf school, which is a nature-based school, and it was like, you know, this is the dream come true. But then I was able to get medical insurance without working for somebody else, so then we could start on our farm camp and our other things that we wanted to offer. And we do family farm nights on Tuesday nights where we just open the farm, and whoever wants to come see an animal or wants to help milk or pick up eggs or whatever, our 4-H kids come out and volunteer, and we get 25, 30 people collecting eggs and helping milk the goats, and for 3 hours it's total chaos, and it's just so much fun.
You get rid of the formal classroom, the formal campus, and bought your own campus.
Yes, we created our own environment, which is so much more fun.
You mentioned 4-H, and that's a really neat youth organization. Mm-hmm. What do you do with them and why?
We discovered that there were 2 kids in the 4-H goat project in La Crosse County when we got involved. They owned their own goats, and they won every award in the entire county fair because nobody wanted to have goats, because 22 years ago it wasn't fashionable like it is today. We got involved because both Cindy and I have always taught children. Cindy, when she was in college, was a camp counselor and all that other stuff. We've always worked with children. And it's like they really needed somebody to take it, because basically when these 2 kids got old enough, the goat project wasn't going to exist. Mm-hmm. So we took it over. We've had as many as 32 kids showing our goats. We own the goats, we feed them, we pay for it. The only thing we require out of our kids is that they come once a week for chores, that they do the maintenance, the clipping, the hoof trimming, that type of thing. We have 2 sessions a year where we do vaccinations and all that stuff, so they learn to give shots and they learn to do the vet work. And then when we have babies, mm-hmm. whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we've gotten kids out of school, which is what they're all hoping for, is let it be about 1:30 when Spanish starts. And we get them out of school and bring them out here, and they're helping deliver. I mean, they're right there in it, delivering the babies.
So you learn a lot about health science, animal science, plant science, food science, ag science.
And responsibility, because they are responsible for the goat. And I firmly believe that it's probably one of the biggest issues we have today, is nobody's held accountable or responsible for what is happening in the world. We hold them accountable, and we hold their parents accountable, because if the kid is not succeeding, it's because they need more encouragement at home. So we're pretty hard-nosed about that, but everybody loves it.
Well, you've been here 22 years. What's next?
I would like to get more into family events, like anniversaries and family reunions and that type of thing. And I know that a lot of people that want to just have a small wedding, you know, like a small country wedding, and there isn't any place. Farms in this area are being snapped up as fast as they go on the market, because developers are ripping them up and turning them into subdivisions, and it's really kind of tragic. They tear down the barns and just put them in a hole, and it's unfortunate. So I would like to get into smaller type events. We have an insurance company that has their customer appreciation day here every year during pumpkin patch, so they get to come and have a pumpkin and go down and get a ride and all that kind of stuff. And it works out really well, so I'm thinking in that direction.
Nice. What's satisfying to you at the end of an event or an experience with a child coming here to learn?
At the end of the day, with all the hassles, and I mean, you know, because not every day does stuff go smooth. Like, never does stuff go smooth. But you listen to some little kid, and they're sitting there talking at the fence, and they're talking to the little baby goat, and they giggle. The giggle is worth it. All of the work, all of the stuff, to listen to the joy, because that's what we need. I mean, we need food, shelter, clothing, yeah. We need joy. We need happiness. That's what makes the human experience special. And that's what we like to give, is special.
A special farm, a special classroom, a special campus, a special teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Hi, this is Kent Thiesse. In many instances, when we listen to the national media about tariffs and trade policy, it sounds like negotiations between presidents and government leaders, and that the impacts are only felt at the national level. However, in reality, most of these trade agreements and tariffs affect individual farmers and businesses and have potentially serious financial implications for those businesses. In addition, there are many jobs and industries that relate to products that are sold through export markets, such as trucking, processing, and other industries. And many of these industries are affected as well. We've already seen some of the financial impacts from the tariffs that have been announced with China and the NAFTA countries, China, Canada, and Mexico. Just the talk of tariffs earlier in 2018 on soybeans, which was a 25% tariff on the soybeans that are being shipped to China, caused the soybean market to drop nearly $2 a bushel in about a 6-week period. Local soybean prices dropped below $8 a bushel at many locations in the Midwest. Most farm operators are looking at a break-even cost near $9 a bushel to cover their operating expenses, land costs, and overhead expenses. If they want to make $50 an acre return to labor and management, that jumps up to about $9.50 an acre. In addition, pork producers have also felt the brunt of the trade agreements and tariffs that have been imposed on China and Mexico. Pork producers, it's estimated in the U.S., have lost approximately $18 per head during 2018 because of some of the challenges in the export markets. One of the other challenges with pork production is the fact that many of the products that are purchased by China, Mexico, and other countries are products that we do not utilize in the United States, such as fresh hams and variety meats, which come from parts of the pig that we normally don't consume in the U.S. The Trump administration has pledged support to farmers and farm families to offset some of the losses. However, what that support will look like is still being determined, and it may be difficult to target the financial support and price support to reach the farm families and farm businesses that truly need the support. Right now, most farm operators and the ag industry is hoping that we can continue strong export markets, and that as the U.S. renegotiates its trade agreements, that they can keep the strong export support that has helped the ag industry for several decades. Thank you, and we'll talk to you next time.
We're in the Soils Lab at Riverland Community College in Austin, Minnesota, and with me is a certified soil scientist, Steve Lawler. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Dan.
This is fantastic. You've got a lot of projects going, and you're going to tell us about the most important one today. What is that?
Well, it's the one going on right now as we speak. We have university students from University of Minnesota and Wisconsin River Falls. And these are students that are pretty much enrolled in earth sciences, soil sciences, water quality. And what they are doing is they are gleaning some basic information on basic soil properties and soil quality under various land use conditions for base data. And so the land use conditions that they are looking at right now are conventional agricultural conditions versus some changes that certain farmers are doing on their agricultural production methods. And we are also looking at soils that are basically under prairie or have not been under production methods for a long period of time. And we're gleaning that information really for base data because farmers have been asking about where are our soil resources at this point in time after 100 to 150 years of agricultural conditions, and if we do make certain changes, will that affect the soil and the soil properties? And the properties that I'm really talking about are soil physical properties, certainly the fertility aspects of the soil, but also the biological aspects of the soil as well.
Why is that important? Why do we need the baseline? How will that help farmers? A
baseline, I think, is important. Number one, we need to know where our soil resources are at now. We've intensively farmed these soils for many years, and it's good to know where we are at physically, chemically, biologically, and we do a lot of sampling on soils, a lot of chemical analysis, but we sometimes don't spend enough time in the physical and the biological aspects of soils, especially those properties that affect plant growth. So I think it's important that we know where these resources are at now, and can we influence those changes with land use decisions.
Biology makes me think of a living, breathing thing, which soil is. Why is that important?
Because everything is really based on the soil biology. Every element, every compound that plants need has to go through some sort of biological function. And if those are missing or reduced in a soil because of certain land use decisions, then that can affect plant productivity.
So that covers the biological part. You also talked about physical, so I'm thinking your soil structure.
Soil structure is extremely important. Structure is really a natural property that soils have that literally takes individual soil particles, sand, silt, and clay, and actually allows them to aggregate into larger particles. And the purpose of that in nature is to allow soil to hold itself together and to resist the forces of erosion, wind and water erosion. And it also adds porosity to the soil, and it allows water and air to move through the soil because it creates macropores around those larger aggregates. And so when we lose the natural aggregates, the soil is no longer able to breathe and to move water properly, and that can affect plant growth.
When you say that, Steve, I think of the opposite. I think of traveling down a freeway with concrete. There's not much porosity to that.
Well, no, and obviously we have a lot of our surface of the earth that is low in porosity and low in infiltration rates, and that's exactly one thing that we look at in agricultural conditions is what is the infiltration rate of these soils, because that's sometimes an indirect measurement of the soil's structure or lack of structure.
And what's the next step after that baseline? And the next phase of the research would be?
Next step would be actually to present the information to the landowners that have requested it. And these folks are looking for just basic information on soil chemical, physical, and biological quality. And what is that level of quality? And if it's high, wonderful. And if it's somewhat delinquent, what can we do to make changes to our decision-making process?
Steve, can you tell us about the soil profile? And I noticed this is a local profile. Can you share a little more?
Sure. This is a soil very typical of Lawler County soils. And the reason we took a picture of this profile, which is down to about 50 inches, is because of it's very common soil in the area. It's actually what we call a two-tier parent material soil. In other words, we have two different sources for this material. This material wasn't always on our landscape. The upper 28 inches is actually material that was wind-blown and also probably erosional from upper parts of the landscape, and actually is fairly new geologically, probably anywhere from 10 to maybe 15,000 years of age. And it's wonderful in that it actually is generally a silt loam, which is a wonderful rooting media, silt loam textures. And then underneath that, this actually covers, almost like cake on a blanket, a glacial till material, which is very old, extremely old, probably 500 to 750,000 years. It came in, as far as we understand, maybe 3 different ice flows. And this is anywhere from several feet to hundreds of feet thick in Malheur County. And so over the last 15,000 years or so, this material has actually developed into soil down anywhere from 40 to maybe 50 inches or so. And it's taken that long actually to develop that much soil in these 2 types of parent materials. And so the interesting thing about these soils is that the best parent material is on top. And that is the part that's most susceptible to erosion, right? So erosion is very detrimental to Malheur County soils because we're losing that portion of the soil that will never be replaced. Most valuable, and so the lower we go because of erosion, the closer we get to this material, which does not have the quality and takes much longer to develop into soil.
I would think it'd be very difficult to try and farm or grow crops on this portion.
This portion here, it literally takes about 500 years to develop 1 inch of this material into soil. And so if we lose soil at a higher rate than that, which in some cases we are, we will never catch up and our soils will degrade.
Is your research substantiating that we are actually replacing soil at a fairly rapid rate in some places, or are we losing in all instances?
No, we're not losing in all instances, but there are certain locations in the field where we have rapid erosion, and then that material is not necessarily leaving the field entirely. It's being deposited in other areas of the field, which is not a good way to gain soil, obviously. But so we have areas of decomposition going on and areas of accumulation, all in the same field.
Have you done some digging to get soil pits so students can actually, or farmers can get down and actually look at that soil profile?
That's one of the purposes of the research, is to not only collect the biological data and the chemical data, but the physical data of the soil. So we are actually taking full physical descriptions of the soil where we are doing our testing, just to understand better how this compares to soils that have not been in agricultural production.
You like this, don't
I do like this, yes.
It's important. Our entire region is economically and also socially dependent on it.
It is, very, very much so. So the more we understand about the soil in its original condition and also in its condition under agricultural land use, the better.
And when we talk about socially, we mean well-fed people behave different than unfed people.
That's correct, that's correct. And all people need the soil base in order to support their society.
Wonderful project, advancing agriculture, protecting our environment, and adding to our economy. Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Farm Connections. More in a moment.
Hopping on tour buses and traveling to operations in southern Minnesota gave cattle producers an opportunity to learn more about how their fellow farmers care for their herds. Minnesota is the nation's 10th largest cattle producing state with about 2.4 million head. Sales from cattle and calves total more than $2 billion each year. Farm setups range from feedlots to pasture operations. As with most sectors of agriculture, cattle farmers have had their shares of ups and downs in recent years as a result of volatile markets, weather, and trade.
Cattlemen in our state we call them farmer feeders, so they also grow crops. So we always got to pay attention to that side of things a little bit. So grain prices being depressed is kind of a double whammy for our guys. When it comes to trade, it's kind of a hot topic right now. We're talking about trade all the time. And so with some recent tariffs implemented on U.S. beef in Canada and China, it's kind of disappointing for us that had to happen. But we're watching to make sure that it doesn't happen anywhere else.
Hundreds of farmers took part in the annual Cattlemen's Summer Beef Tour to learn more about practices their fellow farmers use to be productive and efficient. Because most Minnesota cattle producers are also grain farmers, recent weather challenges and trade issues are having an impact.
The grain markets have a lot to do with it, so even though most producers also are in the grain, so it's kind of a give and take on that end where, when the grain was high, or higher I should say, the feed costs were high. Well, now grain prices have gone down, the feed prices have come down, but it's kind of a teeter-totter for them if they're in both industries.
Our cattlemen are in it for the long haul, and they're resilient. I mean, they understand that the cattle market's cyclical, just like the grain market, and they plan for it. And so I think our cattlemen are in a good spot right now. I mean, you could always wish for higher cattle prices, right? But within the last 18 months or so, I mean, cattlemen have made money in our state, and I think they're pretty happy.
This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
In nature, you either flourish or fade. Everything needs nourishment to enrich its growth, from plants to animals. It all starts with the ground under our feet, a place that provides us and gives us the foundation we need to grow. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thank you for joining us today on Farm Connections.